Okay, hello. Hey everybody. It is the afternoon of Friday the 8th in September. It's a two-stream week. I'm also going to be streaming Valorword tonight, so it'll be a three-stream week, but two streams here on this channel. I updated the Valorword command and it works, which is great. So tonight at 8 p.m. over on twitch.tv/ArvinEleron, I will be GMing Valorword, which continues with what will be the conclusion of the Hibiscus arc, or Hibiscus tournament arc, which has been a whole lot of fun, and it's been really nice to kind of slow down and take more time with an errand. Though this one will be like it might be two full sessions plus part of a session, and it might only really be the equivalent of two full sessions, because we did just a little bit at the end of the 11th session, and then all of 12, and then it'll be some amount of 13. It may be all of 13, because there's two matches, and then there's some non-tournament duel stuff that people may want to do, based on certain revelations that may have come up at the end of the previous session. So I'm excited for that. But for now, I am going to talk my way through some Genrenauts design ideas that I've been having. I'm going to move this. Where is this? I'm moving my stream around. I'm just going to make it, nope. I honestly just want to make it so that the part of me that that when I'm looking at me on a stream, it's, no, that's not doing it whatsoever. Where can I put this? I want to put chat somewhere. Why can I not put chat somewhere? What if I put it underneath? No, I can't do that. I can put chat over here. I honestly want to put chat at the bottom, like this. This is very strange. I don't know what OBS is trying to do. Alright, so now the chat is bigger and I'm not looking down as much. This has been live production with Mike. Okay. So this week I've been doing a lot of work on the Genrenauts role-playing game. I did a design diary, I think last Wednesday. It seems like a long time ago already, but that's just because I've been working on this a lot. So this morning I had a few ideas and did some work, and then I had more ideas during lunch and talked about them a little bit with people on the Speculate Discord, where I have a channel that's like me talking about the Genrenauts design process, because a lot of people there have been playtesting with me, and that's where we'd like schedule games and things like that. So I got some feedback on that pretty quickly, and now what I want to do is talk my way through a few things to get a sense of how I feel about them. Maybe do some kind of fake verbal playtesting of some things, and then see how that goes. It probably will not be a long stream, especially if there's not a lot of kind of like dialogue from folks that are watching live. But I had enough things going on, and it was a Friday, and so this is an opportunity to go ahead and do a stream. Hello, Mighty Mur, and talk through stuff that I'm thinking about. So last time I talked about genre pillars as a thing that I was adding to the game, and the idea with pillars is that they represent like the narrative centers of gravity of the genre, and that for any given region I would have 3 positive pillars and 3 negative pillars, where the positive pillars are kind of descriptions and concretizations of the kind of general narrative physics of a region, and then the negative or corrupted pillars would represent kind of trends or threads within that genre that are more regressive or oppressive and things like that. I'm just scanning down to my actual regions section. And so like in the region of modern action, currently the pillars that I have written up are blockbuster. The flavor text reads, action means everything is big. Big set pieces, big stakes, big explosions. And then the mechanics read, outrageous explosions and property damage do not impact Ripple as long as no civilians are hurt. When you roll combat or waylay involving an explosive, a vehicle, or a building, take +1 effect from an improbably large explosion. If there's no reasonable way an explosion could happen, ask, but what if it could, and take +1 effect anyway. So this is a pillar that I really like because it does a couple of things. One, it sets expectations about tone. If there's no reasonable way an explosion could happen, ask, but what if it could, right? That is instruction to the players to accept ridiculousness in this kind of situation. In action movies, things that should not be able to blow up or should not explode as much as they do, explode a bunch. And so when you're getting your game up and running, if you want to play in the modern action region, this is one of the kind of levers that you can push and say, we do want to focus on the fact that there's always big explosions in blockbusters. The next pillar is just a flesh wound. Having your protagonist collapse halfway through the story due to shock and blood loss isn't very fun. Even if they're running on caffeine, adrenaline, and painkillers, they will keep going until the job is done. And then the kind of game text is, all of your harm penalties are reduced by 1 level while active in this region. Pushing to ignore the effects of harm costs only 1 stress. And this does not combine with other abilities that reduce harm penalties, right? So there's other playbooks and other sources for reducing harm penalties. Just a flesh wound is the lever in the action genre that is like, the characters can just get beat to hell and keep going, and it doesn't seem to slow them down a whole lot. So if you wanted modern action to feel like the Die Hard movies, especially the first Die Hard, then you would probably say, well, just a flesh wound is going to be one of our pillars because the characters are going to just keep on going. And the third positive pillar that I have for modern action is second unit. It's not good. It's not just enough to have action. It needs to be exciting, distinct, elaborate. Hope you've trained in wire work. And then the game text. They could also have sex if they're beaten to hell. Accurate, yes, Mighty Mer. That's, you're ignoring wound penalties. When you push yourself for physical action, you may bend the laws of physics without incurring ripple. Mark 1 additional stress each to also act as a small gain for the scene, take potency when using an improvised weapon taken from the environment, or outright break the laws of physics without incurring ripple. And then the text also says, supporting cast members and antagonists may bend the laws of physics as a matter of course. So if second unit is active, automatically all the time, supporting cast members and antagonists can bend the laws of physics with the action stuff that they're doing. So I have an example in the book, in the document right now. It's not a book yet. It's a document. It's a manuscript. Examples of bending the laws of physics. You could jump a car farther or higher than would be feasible. You could run up along a wall longer than would be easily feasible. The thing with the wall running and like wall jumping is that like people can do that. It's just exceptionally difficult. You could throw or knock back an opponent despite a huge mass differential. You could deflect bullets with a sword. Breaking the laws of physics would include punching someone through a brick wall, jumping a car over a football field, flying a tank, catching a bullet with your bare hands. And so if you want just like physics breaking action movie stuff, you have second unit active. In a campaign, you set 3 pillars per region is what I have right now. But I think the guidance to players is going to be that if you want your game to be about proactively making the world of stories and those stories better, like more inclusive, more positive, less like cynical and callous toward people, then you're going to want to start with at least 1, maybe 2 negative pillars as a bad status quo that you work against. And so the negative pillars that I have for modern action are gritty realism, note the quoting marks, Flavor text. The days when heroes can walk away without a scratch are now firmly in the past. The camera lingers on every scratch, bruise, and cut as the story drags your characters through hell on the way to the ending. This one is mutually exclusive with Just a Flesh Wound. They are mirrors of one another. The game text is, all team members only have one level 2 harm box in this region, and all pushes cost 1 additional stress. Hello, Charon. This PX Charon tells me that this is, the name that you use tells me that this is somebody from the SCA. Hello. Or somebody I know through the SCA. Good to see you. Okay. Got it. Good to see you. Thanks for coming to hang out. So, with gritty realism, we're in the version of action movies that lingers on the pain, that focuses on the ways that human bodies are fragile, that makes it harder for heroes to actually get to the end. You know, this is the version of an action movie where there's a greater expectation that your hero is going to die. The other negative pillars are, the Big Apple always gets it. Flavor text. The region has become absolutely apocalyptic, with every conflict leading to widespread collateral damage. There are no fight scenes without pile-ups and explosions, no grand finale without a city left in ruins. So this is like Roland Emmerich, Zack Snyder, any disaster action movie is... like, this is that trend where the idea is like, oh, well, an action movie isn't interesting and the stakes aren't high enough unless people are just like, unless just whole cities are getting blown up, right? This is Day After Tomorrow. This is any disaster movie, right? Like, there's an argument that disaster movies should be their own subgenre, but subgenres can slice so thin that it gets really unwieldy. And so for the moment, I have lumped a lot of disaster movies into action movies because action is still a dominant kind of verb set in a disaster movie. And so the game text is, once per mission, the GM creates an additional obstacle clock called collateral damage to represent civilians in danger. In addition to other threats, the team must overcome this obstacle or fail the mission. And so every mission, when the Big Apple always gets it, there is some force or threat that would put a bunch of civilians into danger on top of whatever else is happening. So if you're doing like a Die Hard kind of story with the Big Apple always gets it, one, that Nakatomi Plaza is going to get exploded. Guarantee. 2, we're going to focus on an active and escalating threat to the hostages. And that if the Genrenauts are helping John McClane in this version of Die Hard as a Genrenauts mission, the Genrenauts are going to try to help John McClane rescue or protect those hostages along the way, where I think we spend more time with an active threat to the hostages. Or this might be that in another kind of action story, like, oh, okay, the villain wants to like blow up a big chunk of downtown, and you have to stop them from blowing up downtown, but then you also have to go and capture the villain. And so you have multiple major obstacles to have to deal with. And then the last negative pillar is a little bit more directly about kind of the overall trend toward like oppression and regressiveness, where the idea that, or the place that I've gotten to that I'm kind of experimenting with right now with Genrenauts, is that these story worlds are an active site of contestation and like a literalization of the culture war with regards to narrative, where there are people that are trying to push these regions to be more inclusive, more progressive, more hopeful about the future of humanity, and that then there are people that are pushing these narratives to being more exclusive, more kind of subservient to and reifying the power of corrupt institutions, and more antagonistic toward hope, the possibility of a good life, any kind of future for humanity. And so in the world of an action movie, we just have a whole bunch of jackboots, right? It's jackboots galore. Between the fascist militias, PMCs operating turnkey coup services, and bodyguards of the global rich, any villain worth their money has the scariest toughs you could imagine. Game text. All minions gain +1 tier. When a clock for an obstacle representing minions is completed, that's a XP prompt where I've gotten rid of the XP prompts. So in Jackboots Galore, the minions are all tougher. In a different region, I think I have a negative pillar that's about like enemies have greater scale, and I'm going back and forth a little bit on whether I would want to have the same one here. What I would really like is to have dug deep enough in each of these genres that all of the pillars are distinct, and that even if some of the mechanics are similar, there is something specific, and every pillar has they're all unique, so that if I have one that gives minions tier over here and one that gives minions scale over there, that's fine, but they're going to represent something. They're each going to represent something specific to this genre. These pillars are all work in progress. A lot of the pillars have been adapted or taken from the region advances and breach advances, which are an old system that I think, or I liked that system, but I think there is a more cohesive way of doing it, which is this system of pillars. And the goal with pillars is to make it really much more explicit and make it easier for players to reference, like, what are the mechanics behind the aspects or the genre conventions that we're really focusing on for a given region. And so if in our campaign we've got 3 pillars for the action, and we say, okay, well, we're going to do 1 negative pillar and 2 positive pillars because we want kind of a less difficult campaign. We don't want to focus on all this bad stuff, but we want to be able to make things actively better. If you have 2 negative pillars and 1 positive pillar for each region, all of those missions are going to be harder, right? Because the things in the negative pillars make it harder to complete missions. And so this is a little bit of a difficulty slider. If you want absolute, like, iron person, got like most terrible legendary difficulty, start it where every region has the 3 negative pillars as what are active, and you're basically pushing these genres back from their most regressive, most kind of corrupted and misanthropic, toward being versions of these genres that have any sense of hope, any faith in humanity, and any room for anybody who isn't like automatically bought in on or favored by like an oppressive leadership. If we're going to do 2 and 1 in this example campaign, let's say we're going to do Blockbuster and Just a Flesh Wound. So we get big explosions and the characters kind of are very tanky. They don't go down as quickly. We can't do Gritty Realism because it's mutually exclusive with Just a Flesh Wound. But we're going to say that the Big Apple always gets it, right? The Big Apple always gets it is kind of a flip side to Blockbuster, because Blockbuster is about like useful, kind of fun explosions, right? No civilians get hurt. You make it so that you want big explosions where there's no collateral damage. But then with the Big Apple always gets it, there is collateral damage, and you have that tension, and you have a push-pull, and that can be a side of contestation. So when you're like in this example campaign, when you're in the realm of action, you've got this big collateral damage obstacle to deal with in every mission. Right. Like explosions for who, to what end. In The Big Apple Always Gets It, the explosions are because the storyteller believes that mass casualties are required for there to be stakes. If I'm going to give like a critical read to the storytellers who do that. And that is a trend that is not, it's not limited to like one small set of storytellers, right? I have a world killer weapon in Annihilation Aria. I focus on, like, I don't go to the extent where, like, yes, millions of people died in that novel. Millions of people did not die in that novel. And a lot of the people that did die were basically working for the equivalent of the Galactic Empire. And so there's a little bit of, like, a question of whose perspective and to what end with some of these kind of core verbs or tropes that happen in a genre. If my team wants to push back against The Big Apple Always Gets It and kind of replace that negative pillar with a positive pillar, or edit the negative pillar to be like less terrible, they're going to do missions in that region until they either fill the XP track or they fill the storyline clock. And here's where I'll pause and talk about a couple of systems that I'm trying to think and choose between. In the submission draft that got the feedback of Genrenauts, every region had an XP track and every region had a storyline clock. The storyline clock was about getting to a special mission, and if you completed the special mission, you kind of locked down a region. You stabilized it. The XP track was about gaining region advances. Well, now I don't have region advances. I just have pillars. And so I'm trying to decide whether you get to change a pillar when you fill the XP track, or you get to change a pillar when you fill the storyline clock and then do a special mission. Or is it some combination? Do you fill the XP track and then have to do a special mission? Last week or early this week, I decided to slow down the XP progression in Genrenauts, where in Blades in the Dark and a lot of Forge in the Dark games, it takes 6 XP to gain an action point, like a level in one of your actions, your action ratings, and it takes 8 XP to gain a new special ability. And that is a special ability for your team or your crew sheet, or for your individual character, and they have distinct XP tracks. Having just finished a nearly 40 session Blades in the Dark campaign, the characters gained XP in that campaign fast enough that mechanically the game was coming off the wheels or going off the tracks somewhere around session 30. I kept the game going because the players really loved the characters and really wanted to keep the game going. And so I strained and I pushed myself to be able to keep the game going using the rules as written. Because I think in Genrenauts, I want campaigns to be a bit longer, because you're going to be playing out stories across 3, 4, or maybe 5 genres. If I kept the old XP progression, I think you might only get like 2 or 3 missions per region, because you get a mission and then you get a downtime. And so 3 missions in one region is 6 to 8 or 9 sessions. And then you multiply that by 3, and then you're already up to 27 to 30 sessions. Plus or minus a little bit, right? If you have a 3-person group and they have a beat of 3 regions, I think that might end up around the same place. I think I would like to go a little bit longer. And so if it is 3 missions plus a special mission per region, then that's 4 times 2, 8, times the number of regions that you're playing in. So that's 3 regions gets to 24 sessions plus a bit. 4 gets to 32, 5 gets to 40. And the other place to look is what in the kind of office game, the kind of downtime but at work part of the game, where can I add interesting stuff to do there? Because in the longer playtests that I've run and in writing the Genrenauts stories, a lot of interesting and fun things happen at the HQ, not on a mission. And characters can invest emotionally in their colleagues and not just in the people that are in those story regions. And so I want to like unpack, slow down a little bit, and make room for the character relationships, character growth stuff. This is all tricky because John Harper, designer of Blades in the Dark, the original Forged in the Dark game, runs games unlike a lot of people do in Blades and in other Forged in the Dark games. John talks about how they run their games really fast. Like in a 3-hour session that John runs, he might get that crew through a mission, a downtime, and another mission, like a score, like 2 scores and a downtime between them. And I just don't ever do that in 3 hours. So I'm designing a game mostly more or less at expecting the pace of how I run games. Thanks for stopping by, Mighty Mur. Good luck with the appointment. See you around. So I want a campaign to be able to go 30 plus sessions without feeling like the wheels are coming off mechanically. And that means slowing down the XP progression. And so right now I have borrowed or mirrored the XP progression in Court of Blades, where there are slightly more XP prompts, but you cannot get 2 XP per prompt. So in Blades in the Dark, if you, like for crew XP, if you address challenges above your station, right? You're a tier 1 group going after tier 2 targets. If you went after 2 different tier 2 targets in a meaningful way, you could get 2 XP for that session. And one of the things that I noticed running along a long-term Forged in the Dark game, and also this from having done so for other campaigns, that waffling between do you get 1 XP or do you get 2 takes a fair bit of time at the end of a session. And so what if it was simple? What if it's a yes or no? Did you do the thing? Yes. Did you do the thing? No. There are sometimes going to be questions of like, well, does this count? But does this count yes, no? 1, 0, I think will be easier to deal with between does this count 0 to 1 and does this count 1 to 2? It's been my experience that the question between 1 and 2 takes a lot more time than the question between 0 and 1 and comes across, it pops up way more often. So I can maybe save myself and other GMs some hassle by addressing that ahead of time. Sorry, my voice is already a little strained here. Again, I'm not expecting to go especially long for this because I just wanted to talk through some things. All of that I just did, that is review. Stuff that I've already been working on, but have not figured my way out through, or have not talked my way through yet. So now I've got kind of 2 big things. One that I think is not going to necessarily take as much thinking through, and then another that is several systems in one, and I haven't decided exactly where I want to land for that. One thing, and this is probably also pillars, because I think pillars is going to be a really important part of this next kind of release, or the next major build of this game, if I'm using like video game or software terms, right? One of the things that pillars could do is represent basically how fate and how tone supports or undermines characters. So in a Forged in the Dark game, and basically all the Forged in the Dark games that I've seen, they copy the 1 to 3, 4, 5, 6 result structure from Blades in the Dark. You're rolling d6s. If your highest die is a 1, 2, or 3, that's a miss. Consequence happens. If it's a 4 or a 5, you get what you wanted, but there's a consequence. And if your highest is a 6, you get what you want, no consequence, or just like any consequence is really unrelated to what you've done. And most of the time when I'm running forged games, a 6 is just pure consequence, nothing bad is happening, unless I'm then introducing a new obstacle, which I would have done anyway. What if, in some genres, in some regions, one of the pillars that could be active is something that changes that core result progression? This is a little bit inspired by Spencer Campbell's Lumen system. Lumen is designed for like fast-paced action-oriented games, but with some different assumptions. Like Spencer has a whole like tradition of games, has refined Lumen. So Gila RPGs is Spencer's company, so you can go and check out his design work there. I'm not as much taking from that directly as reminding myself that you can break down like a 3+ results schema within a D6 in different ways. So what if in horror regions like cosmic horror especially, or slasher, or maybe something else, what if in those regions a 4 was a miss? What if a miss was a 1 through 4, and then a 5 and a 6 is always a mixed result? And to get a clean hit, you need 2 6s. So it takes the 4 from the mixed result and moves it to fail, takes 6 from pure success and moves it to mixed success, and then takes a critical, or takes a clean hit from 1 6, and it pulls 2 6s over. Okay, you need 2 6s for a clean hit. You need a 5 and a 6 for a success with complication, and on a 1 through 4 you get a miss. That makes all the missions way more punishing. What we'll need playtesting is, does it bog everything down too much? Is it better to instead say, oh, do I take the 6 away from full success and move it to mixed success, right? On a 1 to 3 is a fail, on a 4 through 6 is a mixed success, on 2 or more 6s it's a clean hit. So you're as likely to get some kind of success, you're just less likely to get a clean hit, right? So if I take the 6 and downgrade it, that makes things a bit harder to, basically you're going to get consequences more. If I take the 4 and move it to fail, I wonder if the story will get bogged down, because you're going to get consequences. People are going to resist those consequences or try to resist those consequences. They're going to burn through their stress, and they may just outright fail. But maybe that's good, right? If this is a negative pillar in like the horror region, or it's a negative pillar in like fantasy, representing like the really nihilistic version of grimdark, maybe that's good. Maybe that's a big challenge that people are going to have to overcome. On the flip side, in a region like superheroes, what if a 3 is a mixed success? And what if a 5 is a full success? What if it's 1 to 2 miss, 3 to 4 mixed success, 5 to 6 success? Yeah, so PX Karan says, I don't think that should slow things down a bunch once the team is used to it. Grimdark, exactly. The thing I'm worried about it slowing down is that it makes it too difficult to succeed. And I do my best to have characters and the story fail forward, but if the characters are just outright failing 66% of the time on a straight up 1 die roll, does that make it too easy to lose the mission? Now, making it very hard to succeed, fine. What I would have to play test is, does it become frustrating to the player, or is it just frustrating to the characters, right? Do the players get annoyed that they can't move the story forward the way that they want to because of the way that the dice are ending up? That's something I'm probably going to have to play test, or at least do some simulations. Yeah, I feel like Genrenauts should be leaning in the direction of more successes than failure. And that's why I would probably keep I would keep these like results schema pillars to regions that already have that kind of a higher expectation of failure. So horror regions frequently, maybe something like post-apocalypse wasteland, because that borders on horror. And so I might trial it just in like a one-off horror mission and see what playtesters think about it. Is it interesting hard, or is it unfun punishing hard? And like I said, there's two ways of making things harder. I can raise the floor of what's needed to succeed, or I could pull down a clean hit down into a mixed success. And so the version where you're more likely to get a mixed success and it's much harder to get a clean hit, maybe that creates the sense of being, of like wearing you down, and it's so hard to get ahead. All you're able to do is kind of like try to stay one step ahead of the slasher. Maybe that's better than raising the floor, basically raising the stakes to make it harder to get any kind of success. Maybe I instead push clean hits farther away, where you still get some kind of success on a 4+. On one die, you have a 50-50 shot. With 2 dice, you have a 75% chance of getting some kind of hit. But what you don't have is as much of a chance of a clean hit. And so the consequences will add up. As I talk about it, I think that is probably more the direction I would want to go with changing the dice schema. The upside there is that if I can make it so that only one of the 6 results changes what it does, then that's good. Oh, fantastic. I'm excited that you'll be able to get to Moira's elevation. This is somebody who we both know in the SCA. I haven't seen Moira in quite some time. Please send my best to Moira and to any of the like Minid-Saren Wedco people that you see. Thanks for coming by. Hope to see you around. So if I just make it so that 6 becomes a mixed success. Cool, thank you. I think that makes it harder. It's notably harder, right? You can still get a clean hit with 2 6s, but it's so hard to get 2 6s unless you've got a lot of dice. But then, if I make it so that a 3, 4, and a 5 are a mixed success when, in a region where success is more likely, then maybe that's exciting, right? A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 means that you've got a 66% chance of getting some kind of hit on one die. And then I don't know what the math is on how likely you are to get a success, at least a 4 on 2 dice if you need a 3+. I would have to go and do that math. I don't have a lot of statistics training. I took 0 statistics classes. I know the math for Core Forged in the Dark because I've internalized it over time from other people writing it out. So I don't know that I would want to leave only one number for the mixed success, right? Go 1, 2, 3, fail. 4 is a mixed success, and then 5 and a 6 are a clean hit. I could make mixed success more likely while not changing the chances of a clean hit, right? 1, 2 success, 3, 4, 5 mixed success, 6 clean hit. That means that you're more likely to be able to stumble forward, but it doesn't mean that you're more likely to be able to get success without consequence. And maybe that depends on the genre, right? Maybe superheroes, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're more likely to be able to get a clean hit. And then maybe in some other genre where there is like the more hopeful, more we know that you're going to win in the end kind of a genre. Like maybe rom-com has a pillar that says that a 3 becomes a mixed success. So you're less likely to just utterly whiff, but you are still going to have complications pushing forward. That's probably also going to take some experimentation. The other idea that I had was some pillar, and I think this might have to be a pillar, like a ribbon or an extra thing for some other pillar, which is if you roll all ones, your roll is a critical failure. Forged in the Dark does not have a critical failure state. The closest you can get to a critical failure in a Forged in the Dark game is a failure on a desperate roll, because the consequences are the highest, and you don't get any of what you wanted, right? If your highest roll is a 1, 2, or 3 on a desperate roll, you get a desperate consequence, and you didn't get what you want. The critical failure idea, I think, would be that if all of your dice come up ones, then the magnitude of your consequence increases by 1 step. So if you get all ones on a risky roll, it becomes a desperate consequence, right? We were at risky, you would have gotten a risky consequence. You get all ones, it becomes a desperate consequence. So when you do that, you have a 1 in 6 chance of getting a critical failure if you're rolling 1 die. It becomes a smaller chance if you have 2 or more dice. And I would say that if you're rolling with 0 dice, if the die that you end up using, the lower of your 2, is a 1, then that is a critical failure. That makes a critical failure on 0D fairly likely, because you're rolling 2 dice, and if either of them come up as a 1, then you will get a critical failure. So that means that the worst thing that could happen is worse, as opposed to being less likely to succeed. So there's these difficulty knobs, right? Do you make it so that when things go bad, they go worse? Do you make it more likely that things go bad? Do you make it more likely that even if you succeed, there's a consequence? So we can push and pull on all of these different little parts of the game if we're opening up the hood and getting into the engine, right? Forged in the Dark, from what I have heard and what I've seen, was made to be hacked and made to be hackable, much the way that Vincent and Mackay Baker made Apocalypse World so that people could hack Apocalypse World as they were playing, right? They talk about how the game collapses down to its simplest form. The simplest form of a Power by the Apocalypse move is say what you want to do and roll the dice. On a 6 or below, there's a complication. On a 7 to 9, you get what you want, but there's a complication. And on a 10 plus, you get what you want. If something goes super wrong, someone could get a bonus to their next roll or something. Yeah, Darkest Before Dawn. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, do I want there to be a little bit of an upside to negative pillars? Or do I want there to be some kind of upside when you have negative pillars? When I had breach advances, that earlier form, every breach advance also had an XP trigger. And so it said, like, here's how the game gets harder, but every time you do something that basically pushes against the game, the way that game is harder, you get XP, which is a mechanical incentivization to directly engage with the way that the breach advances made the world worse. I can do that a little bit more casually by making one of the XP prompts for the region be, did you directly challenge one of the region's negative pillars? Right. So in Modern Action, with the New York Gets It in the End, one of the XP triggers for that region, because the XP trigger, it'd basically be one of the prompts for any mission. Did you contend with a negative pillar, or did you push back against the penalties of a negative pillar in this region? And so if the region doesn't have an active negative pillar, you can't get that XP. And so maybe that's not great, but I think having there be some kind of upside or an extra incentivization to directly engage with the kind of corrupted, cynical thread or tradition within a given genre if you have that. And so just having an XP prompt might be enough. One of the things I've been thinking about since getting the kind of letter back from this publisher is, how focused do I want to make this game? Is this game a game to engage with storytelling in a fun meta way? Is this a game to engage with storytelling in a fun and meta way that doesn't attend too closely to like the sociopolitical implications of who gets to tell stories, who gets to be in stories? Or is this a game that has the flexibility to be fun and optimistic and joyful, ranging through kind of like pick yourself up off the street, wipe the blood from your nose. We might say hope punk. I know that term is intensely embattled in a way that I find somewhat confusing. And I came to understand pretty quickly that the things that I thought about when I thought hope punk no longer have much to do, no longer resemble much of what other people are talking about when they're talking about hope punk. So I don't tend to use that term very much at this point. But I think a game that on its surface is about engaging with how and why we tell stories, that you can go deeper with, to say, all right, this is going to be a game in which we're going to contend with the colonialist history of space opera, because everybody in the game wants to contend with that. And we're going to set up a negative status quo to knock down. And so you can control the dial of how intense or how like really real you want the game to be, right? For some people, a dial between fun and emotional satisfaction, right? Because as the Kids Are Asleep say, they're people who escape into grimdark and horror, right? There's if you're in a story where you always know that the worst possible thing could happen, you're not going to be surprised when something bad happens. You set your expectations to a certain point, or you engage with a text because what's happening is not happening to you. Any number of reasons that people might engage with these things. I really always bringing my own perspective to things, and as someone who is not a big fan of horror or is not a big fan of grimdark, I'm trying to leave space for those aesthetics while still designing the game kind of from my own perspective. And the hope there is that I sell the game, and then I can hire people that love subgenres of horror, that love grimdark, but view it as a subgenre trend for desperate hope, and to let them write those region sections, right? To hire people who have the same kind of progressive minded perspective on storytelling that I do, but who connect more intensely and very thoughtfully with genres that I don't connect with as much. The Kids Are Asleep says, I feel like you could maybe set up your regions the way the playsets in Girl by Moonlight are, include like hope punk and grimdark versions of each and let players choose. Yeah, I've been chewing on whether to do something like that with the pillars and guidance in talking about what choosing different pillars means, and something more like a pick list, like the play sheet pick lists in Girl by Moonlight, where, okay, we're doing In a Maze of Dreams. You get your powers from this. The city is like this, and you have lists that you get to pick from, like being able to turn off blood splatter on and off in Dragon Age. Yeah. And it might be, what I might want to do is try to write a pick list for one of these regions and then play through that and then do a mission in that region based on those choices in the pick list and see how that feels. And of course, I'm going to want to play test doing a short campaign, or a one shot where we pick pillars and then we do a mission, and the mission is informed by the pillars. So that is what I'm thinking about those. The last thing that I think I'm going to touch on briefly, because it's almost an hour and I have some errands to do. Plus I have to do prep before Valor tonight. So this is something that I have the least developed, but I think could also be really cool. And so I'll just talk through it a little bit. I've already kind of talked through it some with The Kids Are Asleep and other people on the Discord, like I said. But this is the idea of kind of riffing off of the gilded die and gilded actions from Candela Obscura / Illuminated Worlds. Illuminated Worlds is a game system made by Leila Adelman and Strasha Simovic. Candela Obscura uses Illuminated Worlds to make kind of a specific game in a specific setting, and the lead designers on that are... I'm going to double check Rowan's name. Okay. I wasn't 1,000% sure whether Rowan's last name was Hall or Hill, and I didn't want to I didn't want to get it wrong. Rowan Hall and Spencer Stark are the lead designers on Candela Obscura. So in Candela, some of your actions can be gilded. And when you roll using a gilded action, you get to take a special d6 called a gilded die and roll it as one of your dice for that roll. So if you have a move action of 2 and move is gilded, you get to take a gilded die and then one normal die and you roll. And then sometimes you get bonus dice using other mechanics. If you choose to use the result from your gilded die, you get a resource back. Sometimes that gilded die is not going to roll the best, but you're like, okay. And this mostly happens if your gilded die is a 4 or 5 and you get a 6 somewhere else. You go, do I take a mixed result in order to get this resource back? Or do I need this resource so much that I'm going to take a fail just to get a drive back? Maybe, depends on the situation. The idea that I would take is I would decontextualize and recontextualize what this means. So in Candela Obscura, it's a gilded die because it's kind of the Gilded Age. The setting in Candela Obscura is both turn of the 19th and the 20th century, kind of U.S. and England / Western Europe, and post-World War I. So Gilded Age. Gilded die. Take it away. What is it? It's a special die. Put it into Genrenauts. It's a spotlight die. And the first idea was, what if every region had one action that was spotlighted or spotlit? And the idea there is that if you use the spotlight action, you replace one of your dice with a special die, the spotlight die. And then if you use the result from that die, something special happens. If it were the kind of least changed translated version, you would gain 1 stress back, because stress are most closely related to drives in Candela Obscura / Illuminated Worlds. I don't know that it's going to be that. It might be that you get some kind of bonus moving forward. You might get extra effect. You might remove 1 tick from the mission clock, right? That by using the primary verb of the region, you slow down the progression of the bad ending, because you're basically speaking the mother tongue of the region. And so the region is going to work with you more. Framing it that way makes me think, okay, maybe plus effect is the better thing. Or maybe you get a choice. You get a choice of improved effect or regain 1 stress. I don't know. But there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. Is it that every region has a spotlight action and you can always replace one of your dice with a spotlight die if you have one or more point, like, right? Because if you have 0 in that action, I don't know that you should necessarily get the bonus because you're rolling 0 and taking the lower. But maybe, I don't know. This is still pretty new. Is it that you have to be a specialist in the region to be able to get to use a spotlight die? Are there a set number of spotlight dice per, like, at the start of every mission that you can draw from, where you go, oh wow, I really need some kind of bonus here, so I'm going to take one of the spotlight dice and use it to roll? If that's a dice pool, can you use that for anything or only for the spotlight action? Do you get a larger pool of spotlight dice for every negative pillar in the region as like the kind of a little bit of extra boost to make up for the increased difficulty, right? Is it 3 plus however many negative pillars that you have? I don't know, maybe. I tried to work through, okay, if there's one action that is the spotlight action per region, how much, like, of the 7 or 8 regions I have, do I have duplication? And so the way I talked it through was modern action is combat, vigilante crime is sneak, rom-com is convince, detective crime is analyze, wasteland is tinker or maneuver, I'm not sure, space opera I have maneuver, superhero is inspire, epic fantasy is perceive, because, like, you know, sensory details being a really important thing. And so that was just like kind of a sketch level, like, oh, like how does this work? I don't know that I want the game to try to ship with 12 regions, because that's a lot. But if I had a lot of duplication, then I don't know that would be as fun. Maybe it's just important. Yeah, like, are there 2 spotlight actions per region? So is modern action combat and provoke? Is vigilante crime sneak and tinker? Is rom-com convince and inspire? Detective crime is analyze and perceive? Wasteland is tinker and maneuver? Space opera is maneuver and inspire? Superheroes inspire and waylay? Epic fantasy is perceive and something, question mark. Oh, no, it's channel. It's perceive and channel. Because magic, of course. This amuses me because this is a little bit like domains in Daggerheart, or the Gen Con 2023 build of Daggerheart, where every class has 2 domains. Largely different other than that. That's just something. I have been ravenous for information about Daggerheart because the information that has come out from, like, interviews and things makes me think that it's exactly the kind of game that I would want to be able to play kind of heroic adventure fantasy. And so it will come out at some point. I have lots of other things to do in the meantime, honestly, that I can focus on. It just, sometimes my brain goes back to it, and I'm the reporter, like, shaking the gates at the White House, let me in. I'm that GIF. So spotlight actions, if each region has 2 spotlight actions and then something, is there a die pool? Is there not? I like the idea of when you're in a region, you pull out that region sheet and it goes in the middle of the table, and that there's not so much stuff on that sheet that everybody at the table can't look at the sheet and follow what's important, right? Because you could have the 3 pillars, you have whatever the spotlight action is, you have the contacts that are in that region, and then some other stuff. As I add systems, I'm also conscious of, are there other systems that are less cool, that make the game more exciting, that I can just pull out, right? Do I not need this and that? Am I adding so many systems that it becomes too many to keep track of? And if I think that that's the case, what systems do I take out that are not as fun, that are not as interesting, that are not as specific to what I want Genrenauts to be, that don't add to that core design idea of an adventure game about, like an adventure RPG about how and why we tell stories. So that is what I'm thinking about. That is a bit of a preview on the kind of bleeding edge of where I am in terms of design ideas. And in talking about it and talking with folks on the stream, I've managed to dig a little bit deeper, which I feel good about. But now errands are calling, so I'm going to finish up and go attend to that stuff, because I also still have to do my prep for tonight's Valorword game. So as a reminder, for anybody that's been watching right now, or is thanks for coming by, Trevor D. Mats. Talk to you later. That is watching the VOD before 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. We have a stream of Valorword at twitch.tv/ArvinElleron, where I will be GMing Valorword, which is the Court of Blades game that we do, that is a critically acclaimed 3 times Web Festival official selection game, where I am the Dancing Master / GM. And it's been a lot of fun, and we're going to finish up a story arc tonight. To the best of my intentions, we will finish up the story arc. I would be surprised if we didn't. So we've got all that. If you're watching later on Twitch or YouTube, then you can probably catch that session at YouTube at this playlist that I have included in the command. And otherwise, I will keep on working on Genrenauts and update folks about how the game is going here and there. The VODs for this go to YouTube and then are really only available to patrons at patreon.com/MichaelRUnderwood. Bio. Basically, they're exclusive to patrons at the $3 and up level for like 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how quickly I remember. And then they go public. So there is a design diary that's not public yet, which is the last one. And then that last one will go public. And then in a few more weeks, this one will go public. So watching live, you can catch it regardless. But then for a little while, it's just for patrons, because I want to keep on making sure that I'm making that there's some bonus and some kind of special exclusive or timed exclusive information for patrons, because folks have given me a lot of support over time, and having that steady kind of base of support means a lot to me. And it means that I don't feel quite so pressed to like only write novels. Novel. Be a robot. I like robots, but I don't want to be a novel-making robot. I have enjoyed being able to spend my time also thinking about game design and stuff like that, and running games, and all those kinds of things. So that is going to be that. I'm going to go over down to my ending card, and I will let you enjoy this lovely music for a little bit, and see you next time. Thanks all. Bye.